We're going to be having the dignitaries walking in fairly soon. If you can please start getting seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be starting in the next 5 to 7 minutes. I would like to kindly request if we start getting seated. If we can start making our way to our designated seats, please. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can start getting seated on our designated seats, the dignitaries will be entering very soon. Good morning, everybody. Mesdames et messieurs, bienvenue. Et asseyez-vous s'il vous plaît. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If we can make entry and start making beeline to our designated seats, please, we're going to be starting shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Musonda Mumba, and I'm going to be the MC for this session. If you can just make a beeline to your seats, please, and be seated. We're going to be starting shortly. Welcome and good morning. Bonjour. Bienvenue, mesdames et messieurs. Asseyez-vous, s'il vous plaît. The bell is ringing. If you can all get seated, please. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can make our way to our designated seats, please. We're going to be starting shortly. Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour et bienvenue. If we can make our way to our designated seats shortly. Asseyez-vous s'il vous plaît. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can make our way to our designated seats, I know that it's been a very long night for many of you, but please, if you can make your way to the designated seats, we'll be starting very shortly. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to kindly have the middle corridor cleared. If you can go to the designated seats, please. Good morning and welcome. Welcome to this high-level plenary. If you can make quick entry and straight to your designated seats, please. Welcome, bienvenue. Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, bonjour, good morning. If we can make our way to our designated seats and be seated, we're about to start. Good to see you all. You're looking great. If I can see the smiles behind the masks, but we need you to have a seat very soon as we're about to start. Thank you. I can see many people making their way to their designated seats. Great. Ladies and gentlemen, I can see a lot of us having side chats. If we can make our way to our designated seats, we're just about to start. Thank you.
Can I whisper something in your ear? Yes. Because last time when I spoke, people were so I think it will be a good change of scenery. Yeah. I will introduce you. Fantastic. And your dress is so beautiful.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we can be seated, I know there's a lot to catch up on, but we will be starting shortly.
And I will give the signal when to start.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good morning. This is such a lovely and beautiful Wednesday. Mesdames et messieurs, bienvenue. C'est une bonne journée. Asseyez-vous s'il vous plaît. We're going to be starting shortly. And it would be great if you can be in your respective and designated seats, please. Ladies and gentlemen, karibuni, welcome, bienvenue. It's a beautiful Wednesday. Good to see all these beautiful and handsome faces and wonderful people, familiar faces, even though we're all behind masks. Lovely to have you this morning, but it would be great to have you seated so that we can start. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Musonda Mumba, and I'm the director of the UNDP Rome Center, and I'm going to be your MC for this morning, very briefly. But I'd like you to make beeline to your respective seats, and we get seated. We'll be starting very shortly. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, for those of you who are just coming in, if you can make your way towards your designated seats, please, we're going to be starting shortly. And the dignitaries will be entering very soon. So if we can make our way to our respective seats. Merci. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, mesdames et messieurs, et bienvenue. So good to see a lot of familiar faces, but we would really like you seated, and we would like you to go to your designated seat. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, bonjour, habari ya asubuhi, karibuni, welcome. My name is Musonda Mumba. I'm the director of the UNDP Rome Center for Sustainable Development, and I will be the MC for this segment. Please, I would like to welcome you to this plenary, high-level plenary, and I would love to see you seated in your designated sections and on your seats because we're just about to start. Welcome. Karibuni.
So what we're waiting for is to get all of the important VIPs in their seats.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can be seated, we are now about to start. As you can see, the high-level dignitaries have arrived. Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour et bienvenue. Karibuni, sana, 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 and now I would like to have you all seated in your designated seats. It's such an honor. My name is Musonda Mumba, and I'm the director for the UNDP Rome Center for Sustainable Development. I will now take this opportunity to hand over to the president of UNEA to take over this high-level session. Welcome and all the best.
Dignitaries, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I call to order the 6th plenary meeting, and it's my great honor to declare open the high-level segment of the resumed 5th session of the UN Environment Assembly. I wish to extend a warm welcome to all delegates to this meeting, both to these who are attending in person and also to all those who are joining online. A special welcome to the delegates who are joining from capitals. As you know, the high-level segment is taking place under agenda item 10, focusing on the theme, strengthening actions for nature to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. I now have the honor to present my own address to this assembly. There we go. Mr. Prime Minister, dignitaries, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We have come to the zenith of our endeavors here at UNEA 5. This is a day for the history books. We have made remarkable progress. We have created a constructive spirit of collaboration. We have had a healthy exchange of views, and we have enjoyed the true spirit of Nairobi. Friends, hard work has paid off. So many people have worked so hard to get us to where we are right now. Friends, tell me, what is actually the value of a tree, a bee, of our soil, of clean air, a healthy ocean, or safe water? These are the fundamental pieces of a grand puzzle that makes our very life possible. Because we are nature, and we only have this one Earth. We have taken these pieces of the puzzle for granted way too long. But now we know that the limit to the planet is also the limit to us. It's the limit to our very existence. This is existential like nothing else. We need to reset our relationship to nature. We need to change our business models. We need to change our policies. We need to change our entire economies in order to cater for a nature-positive future. And friends, this will be hard. But the good news is that it is possible. And it's possible because we can do it together. This UNEA makes it more likely that we will actually start doing it right now when we have conducted the works of today. We are about to embark on an extremely important process of negotiating a solid treaty to ban plastic pollution. We have had great discussions on it, and now we know that we have agreement on its legally binding nature, on its broad scope from source to sea, and of the recognition that different countries have different starting points, that we will share as a common goal. We're not against plastics, we're against plastic pollution, and we will develop methods of bringing our plastic economy into a circular economy. We are also about to start the work on setting up a science policy panel for chemicals, pollution, and waste. And that also pays tribute to a grand theme of this UNEA, the importance of science, the importance of knowledge, indeed the importance of truth. We are living in a time where way too many people propagate their own so-called truths or alternative facts. Then it is more important than ever that we have repositories of true knowledge driven forward by solid scientists from all over the world to establish what is actually the reality of a key question. We have learned that from the IPCC on climate. We see that on the biodiversity front, and now I hope that what we are embarking on is to have the same type of collaboration around this new topic. I think another outcome of this meeting is that we are more than ever able to unify the climate crisis with the nature crisis. Both are equally important, both are interrelated, but we also know more than ever before that we cannot solve one to the detriment of the other. We need to understand this, and we need to build it into all our policies. We need to put the price on nature. We need to take this externality, which we used to take for free, into our economic systems. We need to have models of measuring, because at the end of the day, friends, what counts is what's being counted. I also would like to underline the particular importance of the fact that we agree now in this difficult time for the world. We are jointly demonstrating today that multilateralism can still deliver. Multilateralism is alive. Multilateralism brings the world forward. That's a very important signal that I hope we can all take home to our own constituencies. And this is 21st century diplomacy. As before, it is governments that sign treaties. But these treaties would never have come around if it wasn't for the broader collaboration of civil society, of youth movements, of engaged business. And I would like to salute and applaud the great effort of several organizations, too many to mention, but maybe I still would like to say that the strong efforts of the WWF and also the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, which represents two sides of this, an NGO driving knowledge and engagement on the nature front, and concerned business who wants to bring us forward. I am absolutely convinced that we get better results when governments, business and civil society work together, inspired by knowledge and research. This afternoon, we will make the necessary agreements and conclude all the work that we have been developing over these last days and nights, even well into this morning, actually, the last weeks and the last years. And I think we will happily be able to celebrate tonight, celebrate a very, very successful UNEA, actually the most productive of them all. This is why I say this is a day for the history books. But the party is tonight. Tomorrow morning, we have to roll up our sleeves. Because the true value of a treaty is not in adopting it, it's in implementing it. And I hope that we will all, when we fly back to our capitals, when we go back to our normal work, and when the great Secretariat of UNEP will start implementing what we have decided here, that we really remember the spirit of Nairobi and waste no time in getting forward and moving forward on these important tasks. It's time, friends, to act for nature. Thank you for the attention. I now have the great honor to invite Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, to address the Assembly.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as we gather here at the UN Environment Assembly, I would like to begin by thanking the UN Environment Assembly President for his leadership in this very challenging of times. I would also like to applaud the commitment and the leadership of our USG, Inger Anderson, and her incredible team in supporting our member states through these last few weeks. I'd also like to thank USG Bangura and the UN family for making this day happen and to see us all in person, even though we have some of our colleagues online. I would also like to thank the President and the Government of Kenya for hosting this crucial meeting and underscoring the importance of the state of the environment. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are faced with a triple planetary crisis. The state of the world's environment is in peril. Our entire world is facing unprecedented challenges: conflict, poverty, inequality, debt, COVID-19, climate change, biodiversity loss, and the list goes on. These challenges are widening the divide between developed and developing worlds. Governments and people are faced with hard choices to make between the economy and the environment, when it actually must be both, between social benefits and fiscal stability, and these, unfortunately, are false dichotomies. These are not choices that leaders should have to make. You cannot have one without the other. And we know we cannot and must not choose between better food, air, and biodiversity, between education, housing, infrastructure, social protection, and the promotion of girls' and women's rights. We need to do all of this at the same time, and we need to do it together for everyone. This is what the 2030 Agenda and the 17 SDGs are all about. It continues to be the framing around which we must achieve the SDGs and invest in the recovery. The theme of this year's UN Environment Assembly is strengthening actions for nature to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. One thing we know for sure is that protecting nature is at the core of achieving the 2030 Agenda and the goals of the Paris Agreement. If we are to ensure food and water security for all people around the world, we need to prevent an ecosystem collapse. COP26 underscored the need to keep the 1.5-degree goal within reach. We know climate impacts are the greatest dividers. They hit vulnerable communities everywhere. And they disproportionately impact the ability of developing countries to prosper and to thrive. Protecting our ecosystems will help us closing the emissions gap by 2030, a gap that is unfortunately widening and not shrinking. And so will the phase out of coal. The latest IPCC report has once again given a code red for the planet. Rapidly closing window of opportunity. As the SG said, nearly half of humanity living in the danger zone, and biodiversity loss is accelerating. Climate change is already causing drought, heat, hunger, and disaster, forcing millions of people from their homes. Failure to curb pollution from fossil fuels will condemn the world to a future that is both universally dangerous and deeply unequal. Yet the report tells us we still have a chance to choose, and it shows us that adaptation works if properly scaled up. The commitment of Glasgow at COP26 to double adaptation finance is a welcome first step, but it must be delivered urgently and scaled up dramatically for vulnerable countries around the world. We have the knowledge, the technology, and the resources to make the transition to a world that is more just, more equal, and more sustainable. It will require developed countries to deliver on their commitments to provide finance to the developing world, least of which is the unmet promise of the $100 billion, our handshake between those that have and those that need. The amount that Earth ultimately warms is not yet written in stone. Humanity can't afford to wait one more day to act. We certainly have no time to waste by juggling these false dichotomies. Our health, our economies, and our future depend on our ability to make nature an integral part of our investment strategies. I urge you to make the most of this UN Environment Assembly and to go into emergency mode. Progress on a legally binding global agreement on the plastic pollution is a truly welcome first step to implementation, and it will make a difference, one that shows again the true value of multilateralism. Africa has been a leader on this front. As I understand, 34 out of the 54 countries have already put in place legislation on single-use plastic bags, and we encourage the other 20 countries to follow suit. Today, no area on the planet is left untouched by plastic pollution, from deep-sea sediment to Mount Everest. The planet deserves a truly multilateral solution to this scourge that affects us all. An agreement that we now have that speaks from source to sea. One that has incentives for all stakeholders, including the private sector. We have a great responsibility, and I commend the member states for the ambition that you have shown. And the timing of this year's assembly is noteworthy. 2022 marks the 50th anniversary of the 1972 Conference on Human Environment. 50 years since the world came together in Stockholm and launched what many now regard as the modern environment movement. 50 years since the United Nations Environment Programme first took root here. We have had many success stories along the road. The Montreal Protocol will have led to the prevention of an estimated 2 million cases of skin cancer each year and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. Continuous efforts are expanding the protection of our oceans, such as a recent announcement of Costa Rica, Panama, Ecuador, and Colombia on the creation of the Eastern Tropical Pacific Marine Corridor Initiative, which creates a fishing-free corridor covering more than 500,000 kilometers in one of the world's most important migratory routes for sea turtles, whales, sharks, and rays. And later this year, Kenya and Portugal will host the UN Ocean Conference. 2021 marked the end of the production of leaded petrol, a triumph for public health, 20 years in the making. But make no mistake, so much more needs to be done. We have the systems in place, and it needs to be operating at full capacity. So as we reflect on the past 50 years, let us use it as an opportunity to catalyze actions across the globe. As we begin this year's assembly in earnest, I'd like to recall the maxim, "Only one Earth." This is the tagline that defined the 1972 Stockholm Conference, and it will return this summer as Sweden hosts the Stockholm Plus 50 conference. Let's repair the growing divide between developed and developing countries, between the haves and have-nots. Once again, let me congratulate the member states on the work that has been done for the resolution of plastic pollution, and also on the Intergovernmental Panel of Science Policy and the Science of Chemical Pollution. But let us also underscore here that what you have achieved this week will and can change the world and strengthen multilateralism in its true value to making us as a human family on one Earth a possibility for future generations. I thank you.
I thank the Deputy Secretary General for her address. And I want to say that your presence here today is really, really welcome. It shows the importance, I think, of our work and how the Deputy Secretary General wanted to be personally involved in this, and also how you now demonstrate from the UN headquarters the importance of UNEP and UNEA and the work that we are doing here. So I can assure you of the gratitude of all the ministers gathered here, of your presence and your excellent address. Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary General. I now have the honor of inviting Ms. Inger Andersen, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, to address this assembly.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Excellency Felix Mulua, Prime Minister and Head of Government of the Central African Republic. Espen Barth Eide, President of the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly and Minister of Climate and Environment of Norway, and my dear boss, Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, and Mr. Keriabitu Biko, Cabinet Secretary for Environment and Forest, distinguished delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and dare I say, friends. Let me begin by thanking our host country, Kenya, for your leadership on the environment and for your absolutely outstanding efforts in making the resumed 5th session of the UNEA a resounding success. While we meet at a time of turmoil, when peace remains more important than ever, I can say without doubt that UNEA 5.2 is the most relevant and important gathering of this body since its formation. Why? Because the triple planetary crisis, nature loss, climate change, and pollution and wastes risks to pull the very rug from under the Sustainable Development Goals, and with that whip away our aspirations to end hunger and poverty and deliver peace and equity and live in harmony with the natural world. Climate change, as the IPCC report told us just this week, is unleashing impacts at a greater scale and intensity across the planet. We are seeing dangerous disruption across the natural world. Species are migrating in search of more livable conditions, throwing the environment out of whack, and climate injustice means that indigenous people and local community are being hit harder. Nature and biodiversity loss are gnawing at the foundations of human health and prosperity. One staggering example is that 20 to 40% of land is degraded, and that degradation affects almost half of the world's citizens, making it difficult to feed everyone, a task at which we are still struggling to meet. And pollution is, quite simply, deadly. All life lost is a tragedy, of course, but it's important to understand the scale. COVID-19 has caused a tragedy beyond words and close to 6 million deaths in 2 years. But indoor and outdoor pollution causes 7 million lives to be lost every year prematurely. We stopped the world for COVID-19, yet we let it spin out of control with pollution. These three crises add up to an interlinked planetary emergency driven by our unsustainable consumption and production. Given the statistics, therefore, it's understandable that people are anxious, especially our young people, about the triple planetary crisis, that the youth are worried about their future, that many people feel helpless. But we are not helpless. We are here today in Nairobi, and what we will do and what we can do can undo the damage we have done. We've already achieved a lot through this body, through international multilateral agreements, and by actions by governments, businesses, civil society, activists, and individuals. There is record awareness on issues and the science-based solutions. Record engagement for commitment to raise ambition. Yes, we're still moving too slowly to catch up on the accelerating crisis, but we know the solutions, and I am confident that we can deploy them at the pace and scale required. Colleagues, as we heard from the Deputy Secretary General, we are celebrating 50 years since the Stockholm Conference and the birth of UNEP this year. And we must also acknowledge the efforts of many who came before us and who have worked for UNEP, from Maurice Strong, the first Executive Director of UNEP, to those committed individuals who worked for a long time for UNEP, and indeed to those individuals who were traveling to UNEP 4 in March 2019 and who tragically lost their lives. All these people have helped build a platform for action, and we owe it to them to soar from this platform into a net zero world, into a pollution-free world, a world in which people do live in harmony with nature. UNEP 5.2 has given us an opportunity to soar. The negotiators have done an amazing job. For adoption today, we have resolutions that can add thrust to our leap, direction in our fight. They cut across the triple planetary crisis. But the resolutions that you will adopt, amongst them, there is one big ticket item that does stand out. As I told negotiators a few days ago, the world is demanding action on plastic pollution. The negotiators, have delivered to you the first step in the process for agreeing to establish an intergovernmental negotiating committee that will forge that global agreement on plastic pollution. This would have been unthinkable just a few years ago, but today, here in Nairobi, in the only United Nations headquarters in the developing world, in the environmental capital of the world, you are set to take this crucial step to turn the tide on plastic pollution. This is, as said the President, a historic moment, and I congratulate and thank everyone involved for bringing us to this point. But a lot of work lies ahead to deal with the sheer scale of the plastic pollution. Look, in the space of one human lifetime, we have created this massive problem. I remember my mother telling me about sitting in a cafe in Copenhagen immediately after Denmark had been liberated in 1945, and therefore before I was born. And at the table next to her were two American businessmen with some colorful blocks made from a strange new material. And as she eavesdropped, being a curious 18-year-old schoolgirl, she heard them say, "This is plastic. This is the future." And that story has gone into my family because these businessmen foresaw only a future of convenience and indeed profitability. They did not foresee the future, now our present, in which plastic pollution is everywhere, from the deepest ocean trench to the highest mountain peak. We see this pollution, we feel its climate impact, we live in the sheer waste of taking a versatile, durable material material and making it disposable, losing all the value instead of retaining it. Now we must turn that wrong-headed way that we manufacture and use plastic as part of the past. So, distinguished guests, the world is watching, and I ask that you adopt the INC resolution so that negotiations can start urgently and that we can land this agreement itself at the earliest possible opportunity and no later than the end of 2024. And as we embark on this journey, let us be clear that the agreement will only truly count if it has clear provisions that are legally binding, as the resolution states. It will only count if it adopts a full life cycle approach, stretching from design to production to circularity, and it will only count if it takes into account complex situations in many countries and delivers support to those countries as they implement it. We need to explore all options, including goals for new raw polymer brought into the economy from the environment. We need to explore the monitoring and reporting mechanisms to support national actions. We need to set in place financing mechanism and means of implementation. We need to provide incentives for all stakeholders and engage with business. And finally, we need to ensure that the agreement has real political support at the highest level to both agree on the deal in record time and to start implementing it. So decisions that you take today will be monumental. As we gavel that INC resolution, we will have the most important intergovernmental multilateral arrangement and deal in place since Paris, and such a deal could be transformational. Getting the agreement right will kickstart a circular economy that delivers huge benefits. A comprehensive circular economy approach that could reduce the volume of plastic entering our oceans by 80% by 2040. And getting it right could create a model for much needed move to circularity in other sectors too. Energy, transport, construction. What works for plastic could work just as easily in these other sectors, creating jobs and mitigating the triple planetary crisis. So, distinguished guests, UNEP at 50 shows that we have achieved much. But we do not have another 50 years to finish the job we started in Stockholm back in 1972. We have less than 10 years to almost halve greenhouse gas emissions to stay on track for 1.5 degrees Celsius this century. We have the same amount of time to deliver on the UN decade for ecosystem restoration and claim productive and healthy lands from degradation and desertification. And when we do this, when we overcome the triple planetary crisis, we land the Sustainable Development Goals. UNEP is focusing on drilling down on the triple planetary crisis, including establishing 3 thematic funds: climate stability, living in harmony with nature, and towards a pollution-free planet. These funds will allow member states to back UNEP's work on addressing the triple planetary crisis in ways that support countries' economies to deliver with greater impact. You, meanwhile, are here to deliver at UNEA 5.2 on plastic pollution and many other very meaningful and important resolutions. For this, I thank you. But do remember, as we heard from the President, that these resolutions will only shift the needle if, once adopted, they rapidly are creating real work with real-world impact, jobs, opportunities, and development returns. And they can only create real-world impact if they receive unequivocal backing at the highest political level. So it behoves us to follow the science together. As a global community, we must leap high, soar far, and move fast to create a world in which we can all live together in peace and prosperity. Thank you again to everyone who brought us to this point where we have the chance to do just this. Now let us adopt these resolutions and take that leap. Thank you.
I warmly thank the Executive Director for her strong address, and I want to use this opportunity to thank her for her very solid stewardship of UNEP, and on a personal note for the excellent cooperation that we have experienced between the UNEA Bureau and the UNEP Secretariat and herself. I now wish to invite His Excellency Mr. Felix Molua, Prime Minister and Head of Government of the Central African Republic, to address the Assembly.
Excellences, Monsieur le Vice-Premier ministre, Excellente Madame la Secrétaire générale adjointe des Nations Unies, Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée des Nations Unies, Madame la Directrice exécutive du PNUE, Mesdames, Messieurs les chefs de délégation, distingués invités, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est avec un réel plaisir que je prends la parole devant cette auguste Assemblée, au nom de Son Excellence, Professeur Faustin Archange Touadéra, Président de la République, qui a eu un empêchement et m'a chargé de le représenter à cette importante Assemblée. Je voudrais saisir cette opportunité pour exprimer au nom du gouvernement et du peuple centrafricain toute ma gratitude au gouvernement kenyan pour l'accueil comme chaleureux et fraternel qui m'a été réservé et à la délégation qui m'accompagne. Mesdames et Messieurs, le choix et la pertinence du thème retenu pour cette Assemblée constituent une valeur inestimable vers la réalisation de ces objectifs que nous voulons pour la survie de nos populations. La République centrafricaine se réjouit et relève avec fierté la convergence de ces engagements qui s'alignent bien aux instruments régionaux et internationaux et les axes majeurs de sa politique dans le domaine de l'environnement. À ce titre, la République centrafricaine a adhéré aux différentes conventions et accords multilatéraux sur l'environnement. À cause de l'augmentation de la température, mon pays a enregistré des phénomènes d'assèchement des cours d'eau et de dégradation de sol dus aux feux de brousse, à la transhumance transfrontalière, se traduisant par des pénuries en ressources alimentaires, hydrauliques, ainsi que la disparition progressive de la faune et de la flore. Les nouveaux défis auxquels l'humanité fait face, à savoir les guerres et la prolifération des groupes armés et terroristes, ont accentué de manière récurrente la résilience des populations déjà affaiblies par les effets des changements climatiques. À travers sa contribution déterminée au niveau national et révisée, la RCA envisage de poursuivre la valorisation de ses ressources naturelles et énergétiques renouvelables et la promotion de l'agroécologie. Mesdames et Messieurs, avec les pays membres de la Commission de forêt d'Afrique centrale, nous œuvrons de concert à la gestion des forêts de bassin de Congo, en synergie avec les partenaires bilatéraux et multilatéraux que je remercie très sincèrement. L'engagement du PNUE à disposer des ressources financières sûres, stables, suffisantes et prévisibles est une grande garantie pour la prise en compte dans ces programmes des actions de développement durable, de même que l'appui aux pays les plus vulnérables à renforcer leur résilience. L'assistance souhaitée par mon pays se focalise à travers le transfert de technologies, la conservation, la gestion et la restauration de la biodiversité. Le gouvernement centrafricain se réjouit de l'excellente coopération avec le PNUE et renouvelle sa disponibilité à travailler en étroite collaboration avec lui et les différents partenaires. En dépit des obstacles liés à la récurrence des crises militaro-politiques dans mon pays, autant d'ambitions sont fixées en faveur de la protection de l'environnement, nécessitant ainsi la levée totale de l'embargo que nous réclamons. Je ne saurais terminer mon propos sans saisir l'opportunité qui m'est offerte pour formuler au nom du peuple centrafricain les vœux de paix, de bonheur et de prospérité dans un monde paisible. Vive la coopération internationale. Je vous remercie.
I warmly thank the Prime Minister of the Central African Republic for his strong statements. And I now have the honor of giving the floor to His Excellency Mr. Keriako Tobiko, Cabinet Secretary in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry of Kenya, who will deliver a statement on behalf of His Excellency Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces of the Republic of Kenya.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I bring the greetings and best wishes from our President, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, who will be joining us tomorrow during the ceremony for the opening of the celebrations for UNEP at 50. Meanwhile, he has asked me to deliver his remarks, which I proceed to do. Your Excellency, Mr. Espen Barth Eide, the President of UNEP 5, Your Excellency Felix Molowa, Prime Minister of the Central African Republic, Your Excellency Philip Aidom Mpango, Vice President of the United Republic of Tanzania, Your Excellency Salaje Ege Ali, Vice President and Head of Department of the Environment of Iran, Your Excellency Bazaiba Basudi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Environment and Sustainable Development of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Your Excellency Ms. Amina J. Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Ms. Inga Anderson, Executive Director of UNEP, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my distinguished pleasure to warmly welcome you to this resumed session of the United Nations Environment Assembly UNEA 5.2, following the online 5.1 session held on the 22nd to the 23rd of February 2021. This session, taking place shortly after COP26 last year, is expected to provide the much-needed impetus to environmental action at global levels. Your presence here today clearly demonstrates your willingness and strong commitment to combat the triple planetary crises, namely climate change, nature and pollution, and sustainably conserve our planet for future generations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the science is crystal clear. We humans are putting extreme pressure on the planet. Despite representing less than 1% of life on the planet, humanity has crossed the planetary boundaries as the main driver for chemical pollution, biodiversity loss, greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere, causing climate change, excessive nitrogen and phosphorus pollution, and land degradation, thereby threatening the stability of global ecosystems upon which humanity depends. Humanity must recognize that it is inextricably interlinked with nature and that we have a shared future. Our planet can no longer endure the stress. Numerous multilateral environmental agreements, MEAs, have been signed and regulations put in place to minimize this risk, but the risk continues unabated. As we sit to deliberate the resolutions of UNEP 5 and the future of UNEP, we must be aware that the future and the health of the planet is in our hands. We must learn from our mistake, build on the gains we made, and harness scientific breakthroughs. The outcome of this meeting will either determine the future we want or the future we fail to protect. Nature, ladies and gentlemen, never forgets. The impact and consequences of the triple planetary crises know no boundaries. We all face immense challenges which are more acutely felt in developing countries that have inadequate fiscal and technological resources to confront the crises. As we discuss the UNEA 5.2 through the 17 resolutions grouped into 5 clusters, that is marine and plastic pollution, nature-based solution and biodiversity, chemicals and minerals, green recovery and circular economy, let us bear in mind that our deliberations and decisions will determine whether history will judge us fairly or harshly. The issues raised in the resolutions are therefore key emerging issues that need our attention and the call for a wholesome and multifaceted approaches in determining solutions for posterity. We have only one planet that we inherited from our forefathers and will hand over to future generations. The theme of this session, strengthening actions for nature to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, is indeed relevant and most timely. But what does strengthening actions for nature mean in political terms? Excellencies, let me propose that I consider these to mean what I consider these to mean. It means recognizing the existential nature of the threat we all face and what bold and decisive actions we need to urgently take to halt the interlinked and cumulative impact of the triple planetary crises. All these 3 elements are largely driven by unsustainable production and consumption patterns, which are putting extreme pressure on the planet. Climate change continues to devastate our planet at an accelerated pace. In the last 5 years, every part of the world has felt the impact through record temperatures, wildfires, cyclones, or devastating droughts and floods. In many cases, this has led to catastrophic socioeconomic losses and irreparable damage to the environment. In the Horn of Africa, we have experienced an increase in frequency, magnitude, and severity of disasters such as drought, flooding, and invasion of desert locusts. This has led to food insecurity, loss of life and livelihood, destruction of infrastructure, and in some cases, to inter-ethnic clashes over water and pasture. For us in this region, therefore, strengthening action on nature is urgent and critical, and we look forward to practical solutions emerging from this session. Strengthening action for nature also means protecting our biodiversity and addressing land and ecosystem degradation. We need a multi-pronged approach that addresses management of forest, combating desertification, and halting and reversing land degradation and biodiversity loss. This requires us to take bolder action and on conservation of forest, rehabilitation of degraded areas, afforestation and reforestation. These interventions also strengthen community resilience to adapt to changing climate, conserve biodiversity, and protect water catchment areas. Kenya's NDCs updated NDCs recognize the significant mitigation and adaptation benefits of sustainably managed forest. We are therefore taking bold, multifaceted actions on forest, which include policy reforms, an investment to protect existing forest, restoration of degraded forest ecosystem, and an increase in forest cover through an aggressive afforestation and reforestation program. In addition to restoration of forests, Kenya is implementing a climate-smart agriculture policy and rangeland management strategy to support sustainable land management, and implementation of innovative and transformative action in our vast arid and semi-arid land. Further strengthening action for nature means more aggressive and coordinated action to reduce pollution, which remains a major global environmental challenge. Plastic and chemical waste and other pollutants end up in our oceans every year. They impact negatively on food security, human and animal health, and marine ecosystem. We need to collectively address pollution at multiple levels, at production level, at the consumer level, and at the disposal systems level. I call on all to embrace the principle of the circular economy to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Plastic waste management is key to saving our seas, oceans, lakes, rivers, as well as terrestrial environment. That is why we in Kenya imposed a ban on single-use plastic bags in 2017 to reduce the number of plastics in our waterways contributing to marine debris. But a single country effort, while it is, yes, useful, it is, however, inadequate to reduce pollution. We need collective action to develop viable and sustainable substitute for plastics. There is no doubt that environmental challenges pose a great threat to the attainment of the SDGs. Kenya therefore welcomes recommendation for adoption by this Assembly to give clear direction on strategies to tackle the environmental crisis we face today. In this regard, Kenya supports a proposal for a global agreement to tackle plastic pollution as a critical step toward building back better and greener. The question before us, distinguished delegates, is no longer the nature of the challenge, rather it is our willingness and capacity to address it. We need a stronger mechanism to review whether we are keeping our commitments and to exchange this information in a transparent manner. These measures need not be intrusive or infringe on or upon sovereignty. They must, however, ensure that commitments we make are credible and that we are living up to our obligations. For without such accountability, any agreement remains but empty words on paper. In this context, the United Nations Environment Assembly is uniquely placed to engage all countries to raise their ambition to respond to the environmental crises. As I conclude, distinguished delegates, my remarks, let me make it clear. Being a party to several multilateral environmental agreements, Kenya supports and advocates for collaboration and cooperation with the United Nations Environment Assembly. We do this because we believe working together with the Assembly will promote policy coherence and ensure environmental sustainability. In this context, Kenya remains committed and ready to engage constructively in the deliberations of this session. I thank you all and welcome you to take time to enjoy the magical Kenya's renowned hospitality and famous attractions. Asanteni sana. Thank you so much.
I warmly thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Keriako Tobiko, for your strong speech and for reminding us about how all these issues are so intrinsically linked and connected to each other, and for your strong leadership and for the efforts of Kenya in this important work. And please pass on our regards to President Kenyatta. I would also like to take this opportunity to extend, on behalf of everyone gathered here, our appreciation of what the people of Kenya and its government and the city of Nairobi is doing to make this assembly successful. We have now heard the last speaker in the high-level segment, and we will now, in a second, adjourn this meeting. Shortly thereafter, the Assembly will hold a leadership dialogue on strengthening actions for nature to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. That will take place in Conference Room 1, which is the other one on the other side of the square here. The 6th plenary meeting of the resumed 5th session of the Assembly is hence adjourned.